welcome to another episode of Lexitecture, a podcast about words by word nerds and for you. My name is Ryan, and in each episode, my friend Amy and I will be talking about our two favorite words of the week, looking at their origins and history, and generally chatting about how they got to where they are today. If that sounds like your cup of tea, come along for the ride and let's explore the weird and wonderful world of the English language. Today's episode, Utopian Bedlam. So the word that I have this time is Utopia.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's a great word. It's a nice sounding word. It's got good mouthfeel to harken back to an earlier ridiculous conversation we had.
Yes, indeed.
So it's not a particularly old word, and it's a made-up word. It was coined by Sir Thomas More for his 1516 novel by the same name, about an island of the same name. And for the rest of people who haven't read it, myself included, because I know of it, but I've never actually read it.
I'm exactly the same, yeah.
It's so the island of Utopia was a place that had a perfect, like the social, the legal system, the political system, everything was ideal. It was an idyllic place. Everything just worked. It was a perfect paradise. And so it wasn't so much necessarily that, well, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like More intended for Utopia to become genericized in the same way that Kleenex has, to go beyond just describing his particular perfect place to describing any particular perfect place, which is what it basically means now. It's just a shorthand term meaning a perfect place. And for a while, though, it went an interesting way on its path to that genericization, because from sort of the mid-1500s through to the early to mid-1700s, it was still used with a capital U, so it was still definitely and consciously harking back to the More novel. But
it is, in fact, in the OED with a capital U.
Yeah. But it didn't have anything to do with perfection, or even like any qualitative property at all. It just was a mythical place.
Okay.
So a mythical place that was said to be said to be on Earth somewhere. So Atlantis was the thing that came to my mind, or these mythical islands that in the Age of Exploration, which is around the time that we're talking about, they believed existed. Just over the horizon, there's this island populated by golden people or whatever. But it's not. It wasn't a moral or socioeconomic judgment of that place. It was just that it was mythical. And then from there, it's weird that it somehow kind of backtracked and flipped around. So More's Utopia was obviously both fictional and perfect. And at first, Utopia just meant fictional or mythical. And then later, it kind of implicitly means fictional, but more heavily means the perfection. Use it to denote the perfection of a place rather than its mythical or imaginary status, which I thought was kind of weird that it would switch like that. The thing that I found, but the thing that I found kind of cool about this is that the actual building of the word utopia is a Greek-Latin confluence. So classicists out there should be cringing if they cringe when they see the word television, as a lot of nerdy Greek/Latinists
I am not here to judge anyone's particular tastes and opinions, but I feel like there are worse things to cringe about.
I feel like there are places where your cringing energy could be spent a little more effectively and efficiently.
Yeah. If you only got like a few cringe tokens per day to use, and you had to spend them, I wouldn't waste one on that.
I would hope you wouldn't. At least not at the beginning of the day. Maybe at the end of the day when you had a lot left over. You had a particularly good day and you were just like, I gotta use these up somehow. Let's complain about how telescope ruined the word television because it already took the Greek word for vision. That's just too bad. Use them at like 11:45 when you're about to go to bed. But if people do that, they should also do that about Utopia, because the ia suffix comes from Latin. Just sort of Latin form of words has that. But the rest of it is Greek. And it literally means nowhere, because the prefix, the U prefix, is just a Greek sort of negative prefix, kind of like the what was it, the
Alpha privative.
alpha privative of from Greek. A different one of those, it just means not or no, and topos just means place. So
As in a topographical map.
as in a topographical map, exactly. So the word literally just means nowhere. So by definition, all those cynical sci-fi fantasy writers that write utopian fiction with the express intention of undercutting it and saying, haha, your perfect place can never exist, it literally can't if it is to be a utopia, because utopia literally means not a place.
Now, I don't know a great deal about Thomas More's novel other than that it gave rise to the word utopia, which we now use to mean a perfect place. But there is something in my mind that says that it is a satire.
I feel like it fits
I don't know.
the era, but I don't know. I haven't read it.
I feel like To the Google might be a place to go, but if that's the case, then the name very much makes sense from More's point of view. If he's saying, behold this perfection, this satirical perfection, where is perfect? Nowhere is perfect. You know, that strikes me as a perfectly valid point to make. It's lovely.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it meant nowhere. Yeah. I wonder if your research took you towards this. When did dystopia appear?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I didn't actually...
Because I am literally sitting with a dictionary in my hand. I'll have a look. But I think these days, people might almost be more likely to know the word dystopia than utopia.
Yeah, that's very true.
It always, too, the word utopia, it makes me think of Korea, because I don't know if you remember, but the sort of mashup of sometimes Western brand names and trade names and things like that with existing sort of Korean stuff could be quite interesting. And utopia was one of these words that had kind of been pinched by Korean and mashed into their own sort of use. Oh, yeah. And so you had things like spapia and homepia.
Oh, that's right.
And the sort of, it had almost become its own little prefix that meant something really great. But you could just add it on to anything you wanted.
It looks like dystopia comes from 1952.
Oh.
The citation in the OED has it from a work called The Quest for Utopia from 1952.
Oh, I have late 18th century.
Oh, that's interesting.
In my paper OED, but certainly it's not up to date. Here's how not up to date my paper OED is. It says on the back, the OED is also available on AOL.
That's fantastic.
Right next to Encarta, I presume.
Oh, that's delightful.
Yeah,
I'm super glad that of the three of those things, the OED is the one that's still around.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I would like to think that it was always going to be the one to stick around, but...
Yeah, well, you never know, do you? I think I bought this book when I was still at school, maybe, so it was maybe like 16, 17. So,
it looks like Dystopian.
It's a while ago.
It looks like Dystopian was 1868.
Okay.
Oh, it looks like it's John Stuart Mill. J.S. Mill in Hansard Commons on... oh, wow, it's at 12th March 1517. It is perhaps too complimentary to call them utopians. They ought rather to be called dystopians or cacotopians.
Oh, cacotopia is brilliant.
What is commonly called utopian is something too good to be practicable, but what they appear to favor is too bad to be practicable. So dystopian is either from the late 1800s or the early 1500s even. And then dystopia as a place looks like it's from this 52 book Quest for Utopia, it says that the Mundus Alter et Idem of Joseph Hall is the opposite of utopia, the ideal society. It is a dystopia if it is permissible to coin a word. And yes, it is. G. Negley
Too
and
slow,
J. N.
I'm
Patrick.
afraid. John Stuart Mill had it way before you.
Yeah, no kidding. Jeez.
Yeah, that's
So,
very
yeah.
cool.
Utopia.
Also interesting to see how little politics has changed.
Yeah. Or
Nice.
very depressing to see how little politics has changed.
Very depressing, yeah. Ugh.
Ugh.
Oh,
Anyway,
let's talk about words.
Yeah.
God, let's talk about words.
what have you got this week?
Well, interestingly, I now get to make that call that you made last time of
Oh, okay.
title twiddling.
Yes, nice.
In fact, I'd already decided that this one was coming first, but
Okay.
it does work quite wonderfully with Utopia.
Excellent.
The word that I would like to talk about today is Bedlam.
Ooh, nice.
Bedlam, which the OED defines as a scene of uproar and confusion, or sense number 2, which it states as archaic, an asylum. And this is a word that I've long been aware of the etymology of this word, but it's one that I really love. It's like I've taken out an old favourite to have a look at it and stroke the paper that covers it and enjoy it for a little while before I put it away in the box again. So, Bedlam, generally, my first sort of knowledge of this word was when my mum used to scream at us for making a mess and horsing around and generally causing chaos, as, you know, it's absolute bedlam in here.
Right.
And for a long time, it seemed to be one of those words that only ever angry parents used. A bit like the phrase woe betide. And there's a brilliant Billy Connolly skit about woe betide, and he thought Woby was a person.
All right.
So, woe betide the boy who, writes in pen instead of pencil. He's
Right.
like, oh, there's Woby at it again.
That will be.
Yeah, so and it was the only time I ever heard this word, and it was sort of very peculiar. My mum uses this when she's angry, kind of word.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure when I became aware of the fact that the word is a... Oh, now I've completely lost the word that I want to use. It's not a contraction. It's a mash from the word Bethlehem. And Bethlehem comes from St Mary of Bethlehem in London, because, in fact, while Bedlam came to mean any asylum, it was, in fact, an asylum in London, St Mary of Bethlehem. And Bedlam, as a sort of a contraction, if you like, of Bethlehem, dates from 971.
Whoa.
Now, that was not in reference to the hospital in London or anything of that, anything to do with mental illness, but the first time that someone said Bedlam to mean the place where Jesus was born was in 971.
Right, okay.
So, yeah, it makes pretty good sense that Bethlehem, sometimes abbreviated as Bethlehem, which in turn became Bedlam.
Right, yeah.
But the St Mary of Bethlehem Hospital has quite an interesting history of its own. And it was established as a priory in 1247.
Wow.
So very much a fixture in London. And it was first mentioned as a hospital in 1330. Now at that time, hospital didn't necessarily mean, certainly didn't mean an asylum or a madhouse as it came to mean. In fact, the reading that I did indicated that a hospital could almost be like a hostel, a place where travellers and pilgrims would sort of seek rest for the night. So the fact that it's called a hospital at that time doesn't necessarily mean that, it's sort of belied. I'm going to start again and talk with my words. Yeah, so it didn't necessarily indicate that Bethlehem and the hospital and the eventual type of hospital were sort of contained within that. It is, however, very early that it's first used as a synonym for madness in 1528.
Wow.
And around about that time, it seems to have become kind of embedded in the language as not just a place, but with this sense of lunacy, madness, mental illness, however you want to describe it. So we have 1528, first used as a synonym for madness, 1529 used to describe a person who is mad. 1535, someone who's fit for an asylum, so someone who's done something foolish or unpredictable or unexpected. And then 1598, madness itself or lunacy. It's not until 1661 that the sense of a scene of mad confusion or uproar comes into the lexicon. Although interestingly, 1663, just shortly after that, is where the word seems to start being generally used to denote any mental hospital. So we've the sense of madness is there from quite early on as a result of the kind of connections and associations that people have with St Mary of Bethlehem Hospital in London. And as we've kind of talked about before, the fact that London is a capital city, a big city, a place where people write things down, it became the centre of the world in terms of literary reference because that's where the writing was being done. So, St Mary of Bethlehem, or Bethlehem, or Bedlam, has quite an interesting history of itself. If you just, Google it, you'll find that there's a lot to say about it because it's been there a bloody long time. That's not very clever, but it's true. And the first time that I became, I suppose, the first time that I remember rekindling my interest in this word that my mum used to use when trouble was going on was when I was a student and I took a module on 18th century literature and we read The Rivals by Sheridan. And there's a character in Sheridan who's described, the quotation is, "She's as mad as Bedlam." And the reason that I remember this particular use of the word is because in the edition of The Rivals that I had, there was a footnote that indicated that in the 18th century, for the sort of fashionable popular set, taking a turn around the mental asylum was as much entertainment as going to a play or having a lovely picnic. And it becomes very clear from the sort of accounts of that time and the usage of the word at that time that lunacy, mental illness, madness, however you want to call it, was hella funny in the 18th century. B, presumably empathy hadn't been invented in any way, shape or form.
Doesn't seem to have been.
And C, both of these things were so totally entrenched in the culture that it was absolutely acceptable to go and get yourself a seat in a viewing room and spend the afternoon pointing and laughing.
Wow.
And I found this quite interesting, quite disarming, pretty damn offensive, really, really quite odd that's how human beings work. That's what human beings kind of thrive on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, reality TV happened.
Right.
Around about the same time as I was a young undergraduate reading The Rivals. And, I'm vaguely aware of reality TV these days. It's not something that occupies much of my time. Similar to the cringe cards, I probably wouldn't waste much of my energy considering reality TV. I'm not particularly a fan, but it does seem that the sort of general trend is that the more outlandish, the more unusual, the more unpredictable, quote-unquote crazy the contestants become, the longer that time goes on. It's no longer interesting to just portray people doing real things. There has to be this kind of faked up madness going on.
Yeah.
And it always makes me think of viewings at the Bedlam.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so not only does the word mean chaos, mean a scene of uproar, disorder, no one in control, it also always makes me think of reality TV for precisely that reason. So, there you
Yeah.
are, Bedlam.
Wow. That's very cool. A couple things. I mean, I was familiar with the connection with St. Mary's of Bethlehem. As you say, something you kind of know but don't give a lot of
it's like a
specific thought to. You just kind of
trivia question type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm struck by. I'm always struck as a Canadian. I am perpetually struck by how you come from the place where history is from. To allude to Eddie Izzard's opening bit in one of his shows he was playing in San Francisco. He says, I'm from Europe, where the history comes from.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you're like, oh, this place was founded in 12 whatever. It's like, what places? What? What? So you
my
live in
my
old
university
place.
was founded in something like 1418.
It's wow.
I'm going to have
weird.
to check that now. It's annoying me that I can't remember the date.
Well, there's something these, and also like sort of the historical equivalences of like, here's what was happening in this particular place. Like Oxford University was around at the same time as like the Aztec Empire or something along those lines. Like,
yeah, that's pretty head melting, isn't it?
it's just
St Andrews was founded between 1410 and 1413. Sorry,
see, that's
I was
just
a little
so
bit out.
long ago. Like when you go to the oldest places in North America that you kind of go for their oldness, or like Boston or Quebec City, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But even like they were like a collection of tents with wooden stakes around it for protection from bears in like the early 1600s. Like 1608 was Quebec and 1604 or 5 or something was Boston. But like, yeah, 200 years before that, someone was like, we should put a school up. We've had a city for long enough. We should build a university. Does Roger have anything to say about?
Does Roger have anything to say about either Bedlam or
Bedlam
Utopia?
or Utopia?
Okay. You. No,
It's interesting that we both went for sort of kind of
Lacy.
inorganic words, as in words that like that were just came up with specifically to denote something, like more of a concrete, like here is their starting point, you know, like
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes that's not the case at all. Okay. Utopia. So in the alphabetical index, there's Utopia and there's Utopian.
Mm-hmm.
Utopia, the synonyms given are fantasy. So very much, as you said, in line with this notion of it being a fictional place rather than having any sort of particular qualitative description. Right. And the second one is aspiration.
Oh.
Which contains far more of the notion of perfection, something that you want to achieve.
Yeah.
Utopian, the synonyms given are visionary, reformer, hoper, and philanthropist.
Philanthropist is...
Yeah, that is very interesting.
I think there we found the place where you would go wrong-est. If you were following just like, this is a cinnamon? Cinnamon. Jeez.
A cinnamon, a delicious, delicious cinnamon bun.
Turns out I'm hungry. Okay.
You sound so disappointed in yourself for making a really very understandable slip.
Yeah.
Listen, I have to think very hard before using the word stamina. That was my thinking hard. Because my husband and I always, in the privacy of our own home, refer to it as stamina. No, stanima.
Stanima.
Now I can't get it wrong on purpose.
That's great.
Yeah. Bedlam. Where are you? Okay. Yeah. Disorder, confusion, turmoil, loudness, discord, and then finally, mental hospital.
Well, it still has that connection in there.
Roger and I are on the same page this time.
He gets you.
Yeah.
And that's it for this episode of Lexitecture. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed what you heard, please give us a rating and review on iTunes, and be sure to tell all your word nerd friends about us too. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter by searching Lexitecture, Lexitecture. And if you'd like to get in touch with us about the things we talked about this episode, you can send us an email at words@lexitecture.com. Special thanks to the Joy Drops for our theme music, and we'll talk to you again next week.